our young people using modern API-first technology to ensure a seamless, agile, but personalized and targeted approach. I'm Liz Lumley, Deputy Editor of The Banker, and we have a wonderful panel for us this afternoon, which will have talk lots about youth cards and youth in financial services. So we have David Gonzalez, Head of Sales at Jimmy, Igor Korek, CEO and co-founder of Nikki Card, Tom Bishop, product lead at Osper. I should have a disclaimer here. All good journalists. My son is an Osper user and has been for quite some time. So hopefully that won't lead to any bias on the panel. And finally, we have Vasilis Zupas, CEO of Woolly. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, to our audience, we are live. So if you want to post some questions in the chat, we will be looking at that from time to time. I will advise that the best questions are ones that are short, relevant, and to the point. And then you're more likely to be asked on air. But we're going to start with some of our questions right now. So I want each of you to really tell us a little bit about what the landscape looks like in your market, in your region, when it comes to cards being offered to young people. And what we mean by young people are people under the age of 18. So I'm going to start with Vasilis, if you could start us off with that.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for the invitation and the organization. We are Wally. We're based in Athens, Greece. We started to operate here. Our focus is Southern Europe. In the local market, in terms of, let's say, cards for youngsters, there's nothing major happening apart from some basic prepaid cards. That typically you need to go by the bank, office to visit, etc. I think with no basic parental controls. And on the application side, there's actually nothing happening. So there's no app or, let's say, digital tool, let's say, to assist the kids in their endeavor with money. So we are the only guys, the only company operating here. And we also try to educate the market in that sense.
Very interesting. So David, I'm going over to you. I'd like to know, what is it like in your region?
Yes. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me in the panel as well. We are currently based out of Stockholm. So our region, or mostly I will be speaking about the Nordics, where most banks are already offering cards as a payment method, but we don't really see that there is a financial education coming with that, neither a child-friendly app. So it feels a little bit like buying a product, but that product, the card, comes with no instructions. We see the trend in the Nordics to a cashless society, especially among younger generations. So we see now the first generation that is growing fully in a cashless environment. So they need a money solution. Now, that's what I think all the members of this panel, Wally, Nikki, Oscar, and Jimmy ourselves are trying to do, is to support the financial education with a more child-adapted and understandable method. In our case, it's via an app, because we believe that's kind of what younger generations are using the most. And when it comes to the card itself, what we do is that we have the debit card linked to the account that is connected to the app. But we look at these cards in a more holistic approach, like I said, because we don't just give them the power of having a card, but also the financial education to use it wisely.
Interesting. So Tom, I'm over to you now to find out more about card usage in your region.
Thanks, Liz. Great to be here. Osper is based in the UK. I am incredibly jealous of my colleagues who have just spoken, who have no competition in their local market, because the UK is probably the most competitive youth card marketplace in the world right now. Probably the most crowded one, certainly. It's not a bad thing. Competition is good. Competition drives us forward. It forces us to make a better product and better experience for customers. But for Osper, we see our growth happening outside of the UK market. We just launched a new product called Prosper, which is essentially Osper in a box. It's a youth banking as a service product. It allows anyone, almost anywhere in the world, to launch their own youth card program. So that for us is where we're taking our product next.
Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. So, Igor, why don't I go over to you to find out more about Nikki Card in your region?
Yeah, Liz, I'm honored to be in such good company, and I can tell you a little bit. Nikki Card is based out of the Netherlands. We're in Amsterdam, so a little bit of a smaller market, the Dutch market, but it is almost completely cashless. So using debit cards is almost normal here. Nobody actually uses cash anymore. So even though there's 2 million prospective users from 10 to 20 years old, all of them essentially get cards when they turn into high school at age 12 or 13. So, and to mirror what Tom said, currently there are no actual teen neobank competitors in the Netherlands. The traditional banks have been servicing this market for a while now, but kind of similarly to what David said, we're trying to focus a lot on financial education, where the card is just a way of learning by doing. So we're trying to teach teens money skills for life. And to a certain degree, any teenager can get a 10 out of a 10 on a quiz and then do mistakes in real life. So we're using the card as an instrument to show that they've learned what they claim to have learned and that they actually translate that into real life. So for us, it's an ed tech with a card component.
Very interesting products from all of you, and I'm glad we have a nice sort of offerings from different countries as well. So we're going into, I'm a parent. I don't know how many other parents are on the panel. According to some research, a lot of parents have had a child use their payment card without their permission, which I think I'm probably a bit sheltered. I remember nicking a few dollars from my mother's wallet when I was a child in the US, but I would never have touched a card. But I guess not everyone grew up in the same household. But I think this is probably really prompted by the online world that a lot of children live in, and a lot of the marketing messages and in-app purchases that pop up at children at various times. So I wanted to know kind of your thoughts about this. I mean, children are children, and there's a certain amount of financial literacy that needs to be taught. So I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on kind of that landscape. So Tom, I'll go to you for that first.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. We should probably say that when we talk about kids stealing money from parents, in many cases, this is not deliberate, it's inadvertent. You get your first games console, you set up an account on the games console, it asks you for a debit card, and you put mum or dad's debit card number in there, of course. And then a pop-up appears on the screen that says, do you want an extra life? And you say yes. And without recognizing that money's coming out. The worst one we saw was a kid in Cincinnati who $26,000 was the we managed to run up. That's currently occupying the Hall of Fame, I think. If anyone listening knows of a better one, write in and we'll give you a prize. But gaming more generally, Liz, is a really good point. Gaming is huge. Unless you're a parent of a child of a certain age, it's really difficult to appreciate how big a part of people's lives gaming plays. I should say, obviously, we have a fintech audience here. Gaming, when we're talking about gaming now, we're talking about computer games, not the traditional definition of gaming, which is gambling and casinos. So I'm talking strictly about computer games now. But the gaming industry is enormous. During lockdown, we saw spending across all ages and all genders was almost 40% on gaming. So it's a huge, huge part of children's lives. If I can rant on for a minute, though, there is one thing I wanted to talk about today, particularly, which is this idea of loot boxes. I'm sure my colleagues on this call will know about this as well. For reference, loot boxes are a kind of in-game upgrade. It's a way of buying upgrades in a game. To put it in context, in the olden days, back when I was playing computer games, if you're playing a football game and you wanted a better football player, you'd have to play the game a bit more and unlock it that way. Then games companies discovered microtransactions, and you could then buy the better player, or if you're playing a shooting game, buy a bigger gun. And then they discovered these idea of loot boxes. And loot boxes, you buy the chance to get a better player or a bigger gun. So you pay some money, you have no idea what you're going to get up front. Once you've paid your money, they then tell you what you've won. if that sounds like gambling to you, you're absolutely right. It is. It's 100% gambling. And yet children as young as 6, 7 are getting involved. So for me, when we're talking about gaming, when we're talking about children in particular, that for me is one of the biggest concerns.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have a 17-year-old son, so when you mention gaming, I know exactly what you mean. I guess Splatoon launches at midnight today, which we've been hearing about all week in our house. But David, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, about the world of in-app purchases and marketing and aiming at children, and how that works for this market.
Yeah, I'm not a parent myself just yet, but I can tell you that letting your child use your card is likely to be the first step into that child's financial journey. And after that comes him or her using their own card. And of course, with that, it might come some bad experience, absolutely. I mean, kids are going to be kids, and it's totally fine that they make these mistakes. In fact, they should probably make these mistakes because it's part of the process. We still do it as an adult. I bought a flight ticket this morning, and then when I just completed the purchase, I realized that, oops, it was the wrong date. Fortunately, it wasn't $26,000 or euros. I don't know how much you said, but so I mean, we are allowed to make mistakes. What maybe it's not so okay is for companies taking advantage of this child's journey, so to speak. So I think that's why it's important that we contribute educating children on what the money really is. So they really understand what are the implications and what are the consequences of using real money. And I fully agree with Tom that we can achieve this in a fun way by having a gaming environment. I think that's what we are trying to do with at least all of us, with our companies that are here in the panel, to present this in a very appealing way to kids.
So I wanted to stay, before we get into other pain points, I had a follow-up question that I thought, and Tom, if you wanted to comment on this as well. When you mentioned the $26,000 purchase from the poor child in Cincinnati, that obviously came off a bank card that belongs to an adult. If the card was one of your product offerings, which is obviously for a child, would that be some sort of barrier, some sort of stop that would have stopped something like that from happening?
Absolutely.
That the company wouldn't have been able to take that money off?
Absolutely right, Liz. So our product, and I think probably talking to the guys around the table with the same thing, it's a prepaid product, which means you can only spend what's loaded onto the card. And so if you put £10 of pocket money on a Friday afternoon, and on Friday night your child spends all £10 on gaming, then that's it. That's all they've got, unless they go and wash the car or mow the lawn or something like that. But yeah, so A, it would be stopped at that sort of level, and B, and again, this is not unique to us, but I'm sure, but we offer a load of controls within the product as well. So if you don't want the card being used for online spending, within the app you can tick a box, and online spending is turned off. So again, child is spending too much time indoors and want them to go out for a walk, you can turn off online spending and kill them.
Interesting. So moving away from gaming a bit, maybe we can talk about some other pain points that parents and guardians have with that kind of lends itself to creating some of these products for young people. So David, I'll go back to you to have your thoughts. What are some of the pain points that come into the product design?
I mean, to us, that was key when we created the app and all the features that come with the app, and that's why we did some deep research with parents and children. And at the end of the day, one thing that we understood is that for us, it wasn't that useful to use cards anymore, as we see the value of open banking being stronger for us. I'm not saying that cards might be worse, but what we realized is that by using open banking, we could solve one of these major pain points, which was what we are doing today is to connect the parent app to the child app, and by doing that, we give support to the parents because children they grow this interest for finance and money, and at the same time, parents are able to track basically what they are doing with their money, but they are also allowed to pay the weekly allowance. They can assign some chores to their kids that come with some economic reward. So once they are completed, they can actually do this micro transfer. So that was our way to solve one of the main pain points that we saw when we first started with building up the app.
Wonderful. I mean, I'd love to hear more about some of these pain points. So, Vasalis, I was wondering whether you could give us some insight.
I would love to move away from gaming, Liz, but honestly, it was one of the reasons why we started Wally as a business. So I need to build up on this a bit. Touching upon Tom's input, because we have a smaller business, but our metrics are around the same size. So 25% of consumption is around gaming. And it was the main complaint we were having in the region from parents complaining about the sort of not the addiction in a bad way, but their inability to control their spending on that front. So we're using this as a very major pillar on what we are building, and that's why we're also building new synergies with gaming companies. We try to offer rewards around gaming in the app. So we think we really want to help the children consume more smartly through the app, but also manage their gaming habits in a more healthier way. So it was a critical thing for us. So that's one thing, and the other one was obviously education for us. So the big gap I think the big gap, and that's what everyone will agree, and we can discuss about that, is the fact that obviously it's not in any country I've been, it's not properly dealt with either at school or at home. And from personal experience, my money management skills when I was 18 were horrible. So, I can attest to that, So, these are my 2 cents on your question, Liz.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think any 18-year-old has a wonderful financial sense. But yeah, so Igor, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the pain points that go into developing the product.
So we've spoken to over 100 parents, and the thing that we heard over and over again is that their experience growing up is much different than their children's right now. A lot of parents lived in a fashion where you would get a cash allowance. You would get coins that you would put in a piggy bank. When you would spend it, you would have to break the piggy bank. It was very physical, very tangible. Well, right now with their children, they see the fact that it's just numbers moving on a screen, and the child doesn't really have that feeling of consumption or of opulence just because it's so easy to move. And the more we move into this space where it's not even physical cards anymore, where it's virtual cards on phones or tap your watch to pay, the more it goes into that direction. So we kind of challenge that model a lot with kind of the educational approach of let's teach children proper money skills. And all of the teenagers we talk to, they say like, I'm done with school at 5 and I will never learn anything again. Like, don't teach me stuff. So it has to be a chedek. You have to kind of teach them while they don't notice they're being taught. So things like parent-funded savings, where parents will top them off if they reach a certain goal, or parent loans if they want to buy a PlayStation console or something like that. There's parent-funded investments where kind of there's a little bit of hand-holding, but also you can show children a way of earning money by posting crypto and by like doing NFTs. It makes that money very tangible. So it's the educational component is kind of a counterweight to the new cashless society that is normal for digital natives, the teenagers, the Gen Zs of today.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We're getting some comments from the live audience, which are along sort of the same lines, which is, what is the benefit of having that separate prepaid card for the young person when you can give them your card and have a limit on it, or there are different children's apps which don't have a card. Sort of what is that benefit to them? And it kind of goes into our next question about the offerings that are usually offered to young people tend to be kind of suboptimal and not that wonderful an experience. So how is having your own prepaid card, which is usually connected to your parents or guardian's card, how does that help develop that financial literacy? So, but Vasalis, I'll go to you first for that.
Yeah, I think we mentioned the word holistic. I think it's an important word because we want the whole experience to rely on the kid. We want the kid to have the full, let's say, responsibility as much as he can take, and we want the kid to make mistakes. And that's my personal, let's say, belief that I don't think there's any other way to teach anything but making mistakes and making real life mistakes, right? So if you don't have your own, let's say, purpose-built application, which is essentially a digital tool, right? Connected with a card that holds the money and your allowance. And that's where you learn how to earn more, or you learn how to make your saving goals. And that's where the card comes in to make you a smart consumer. I don't think these two things separately can work, in tandem. It needs to be in tandem so that you get the kid and the teenager to get to the bottom of this, let's say, difficult task, which is learning how to manage money.
But in an environment where if they make a mistake, it's not $27,000. It's
exactly. And I think the big benefit of what everyone here is trying to do is also to have a tool within the family where the parent can come in and say, you did this, Billy. Like, what's this? Why was this? This was wrong. You exceeded something. There was a budget. So it's not that it works on its own. I think it works in the context of the family, and that's what we're trying to build here, right? Tom is nodding.
100%, Vasilis. Yeah, 100%. This is something that I wanted to talk about today as well. You can have the greatest product in the world, and sat around this meeting, there are the greatest products in the world. But unless a parent is involved in this learning, this journey, this education, the product is never going to fulfill its potential, and your child is never going to learn. We do see sometimes, a parent takes out a card, loads some money onto it, hands it over to their child, and then that's it. That's the extent of their involvement. And you're not teaching that way. You're not getting the maximum benefit of the learning experience. We always encourage parents, and I think Vasilis, you touched on this before, to sit down and discuss the spending with their child. Say, okay, I can see that you spent $3 in Starbucks yesterday. Was that a good use of your money? Think about when you get your first job, how long will it take you to earn that sort of money? We call it mindful spending, this idea of being aware of what you're spending. And without that parental involvement, it's just another app on the phone.
If I can add to that.
I agree. Yeah, go, David, please.
So there's one really interesting thing here that this panel's been speaking about teen neobanking for 20 minutes now, and I think the word education comes in every sentence. And I challenge anybody to tell me of an adult bank that has ever put out, let me teach you about mortgages, let me teach you how to save more and take out less loans. And kind of to that same point, those same adult banks do offer teen accounts, but it is the adult app just given to a child, right? It is minimally modified, and there is space to help them. And a lot of kind of adult banks are now catching up on the curve, but they are very much there for a financially motivated profit model. Adult banks are there to push loans on you. So if they are going after teen accounts, they see them as, let's get them young, because we know 90% of people will stick with their first bank for life. So that by the time they turn 18 or 21 or 25 and want to get their first mortgage, they will consider us first. That's the motivation. It's not let us teach them so they never end up in a debt trap anyways. And I think that's a huge differentiator.
But I wanted to maybe stay with you because it goes into our next question, because we wanted to talk a little bit about some of these offerings from traditional banks like NatWest in the UK recently acquired Rooster Money, for example. But I mean, as I mentioned before, my son uses Osprey. When we went small disturbance in the matrix. When we went to go get him an account, it was a passbook, and it wasn't that financial. It wasn't that individual freedom that we wanted to offer him with the card. So if banks are looking to lock in that loyalty early so that they can become an adult, why have they been so slow why have their products really not been modern and more child friendly and more. I'm just wondering why they haven't caught on to this. Like most of the offerings for this market have been outside the traditional banking environment.
Absolutely, 100%. It's the NatWest purchase of Rooster Money is a great example of what we're talking about here. I know that they explored building it in-house, but they decided to make the decision to buy lock, stock and barrel a company to provide this service. On a personal level, that's really good. It vindicates our new business model or new product offering to be able to offer these kind of service to incumbent banks. But more widely, it's interesting for me that we're 10, 15 years into the fintech revolution, but innovation is still coming from startups and challengers. The incumbents are still finding it difficult to innovate. They're still finding it difficult to adapt. And I don't know why that is. Is it legacy technology? Is it a culture that doesn't value and reward innovation? Honestly, I would love to know.
I would add to that, competition mandates innovation, right? Similarly to adult neobanking some 10 years ago, when it came on board, nobody said we're missing banks in Germany or in France, right? But they came on board and spread like wildfire. And similar to that, now people are noticing that there are niche markets, either teen banking or divorcees or people of color. There are multiple verticals here to explore, which are very much targeting a specific subset of the populace and making products that their customers want. If you're a universal bank and you have to target everybody, you're targeting nobody at the same time. And I think right now those niches are being explored and innovation is coming their way. So in 5 to 10 years, yeah, adult banks will catch up, and then who knows, maybe open banking will be the next big thing.
So Igor, I wanted to stay with you then. I mean, if all of your companies are this, this fintech startup, what happens when your customer base turns 18?
So there's two ways this can work. So you can either stay a dedicated teen account, and then a smart thing that we are exploring is you offboard your users to one of the adult banks. So essentially you churning a customer is them acquiring a customer, and you can do that through strategic partnerships. It can even be paid. So essentially the bank gets a new customer, while at the same time their cost of acquisition is lower and they're paying you for a soft offboarding. On the other hand, you can just go into adult neobanking, so a student card or a young adult card, because they've been with your platform, let's say from age 12 to 18. You've got 6 years of experience with them. Why not offer them, just take away a little bit of the parental control and insights, give them a little bit more freedom, and top it off with probably a credit line, a credit card, early mortgages for those that go into work, how to pay rent and utilities, and expand on the product offering. So you don't necessarily have to lose a user. Mm-hmm. And if you've been a great experience for them, they're not going to want to go.
I don't know if any of you else have some thoughts on that, about what happens when your market ages, as we all do.
I can. Yes, thanks, Tom. I think I'm quite aligned with what Igor pointed out. I just wanted to point out something as well for the point you mentioned before about the banks, Liz, if I'm allowed. I think there's also a gap in the because I've been discussing with various banks in the region at least, and there's a big, let's say, difference in prioritization internally. There are many things of legacy banking that still remains. There are technology barriers, and there are all the problems that a very big company it's not able to innovate because prioritization internally is very, very different than focusing on something, youth and educational. So yeah, but on this point, I think Igor covered me. The point is that we, as Wally, I think we're trying to stick to what we have to do best. So it's a big leap to go into adult banking as a proposition. I think you need to stay where you're focusing on the customer needs, which are the kids, the teenagers, and possibly the youth adults as well. Up to that point, I think it's good. Beyond that, the competition is fierce.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is. What these guys have said is absolutely true, and there are various off routes and off ramps that can be monetized. It's I want to say on a wider level as well. It always sucks to lose a customer. But when a customer ages out of your product, having learnt about money, having learnt how to spend responsibly, having learnt how to good savings habits, and you're sort of like mother duck sending them out into the world to go off well equipped and well educated, that's a really good feeling. It's the best possible way to lose a client, definitely. And the feedback emails we send, exit interview to parents, the feedback messages we get from parents are absolutely wonderful. Really, really lovely messages saying, thank you, my child is using your products. It's taught them so much. They've been able to live independently but safely. We keep a track of these. If we're having a rough day at work, it's always nice to go and have a look at these and remind yourself why you're doing it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, my son is going to graduate to Starling Bank in a few months, so he'll be saying goodbye to us.
Congratulations to him.
Before we move on to talk a little bit about APIs, I wanted to bring up a question from the audience. We've been talking a lot about prepaid cards and having that physical card, and I think earlier someone talked about the old days of having a piggy bank and having that physical connection to money and seeing how much you have and taking it out personally. And so, but they mentioned most people are on their mobiles and phones constantly. Is there a push to have more having these products work on their phone, work without that card system? I don't know where your product development is. Does anyone want to pop in on that one?
Yeah, there's also a lot of costs associated with it from a development perspective as well. Not just developing, but scheme costs to Google and scheme costs to Apple. It is not a cheap thing to implement, and that's something I really do expect and want to see come down over the next few years as these become more common, as it becomes more mandatory for scheme. Setup costs are prohibitive. I'm seeing nods from around the table.
I know. I'm going to go to you. I'd love to hear Igor and Vasilis' thoughts on moving away from that physical card and having it just on the phone.
There is one thing people don't actually know, outsiders from the industry don't know, that Google and Apple Pay will actually set age limits under which they don't let people put virtual cards on their phones. So even though you would want to give somebody a virtual card because they have a cell phone at 13, per country it's different, but it might be under Apple or Google's policy that they don't allow that. Mm-hmm. So somebody walks up to you, an investor says, "Oh, why are you offering physical cards that's so 2010?" And then you tell them, "Unfortunately, we cannot."
Yeah.
And
Google and Apple stopping the innovation. That's interesting. Vasilis, what do you think?
I mean, agreeing with all of what's mentioned before, including also there's a long time frame to be accepted by Apple, for example, and there's kind of a bureaucracy around that. And on the other hand, my point of view is that for this target audience, it's also on our benefit to have the plastic card, even if it's eco biodegradable. To be out there in the market for awareness reasons, that's very helpful for us. So we really want, especially the initial stage, the card to be out there physically. But we get this request a lot. I'm going to be honest, and it's a matter of basically cost and effort for us to get into Apple and Google.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about APIs and open banking. And Tom, I'll go to you for this question. I mean, the topic I hear a lot, especially in retail banking, is making it tailored solutions and personal solutions. So how is sort of open banking in the API economy really enabled you guys to offer that tailored financial experience to young people?
Absolutely. And we touched briefly on this earlier on. We have this new product, which is essentially banking as a service, or youth banking as a service. And that can only be possible thanks to the API economy, both in terms of the services that we plug into our platform, everything from eKYC to the chat functionality with the customer support team. But equally on the other side as well, we're integrating with incumbent banks, retail banks all over the world. And again, this wouldn't be possible without APIs. So absolute core to what we do. In terms of open banking, less critical, truthfully. David, I'd be really interested to know how you're doing the funding via open banking, because we've struggled with variable recurring payments via open banking. I can see, okay, fair enough. But also, don't forget, one of the other major benefits of open banking is supposed to be an amalgamation of all of your different accounts together. And when you're 8 years old, you don't have a lot of accounts, truthfully. So open banking on that side is perhaps less useful for the youth audience.
Interesting. So, I know we're talking about young people here, but so this is basically a payment. You deposit money and you use it to pay for things. But I'm looking at how do you expand that product, and what are the barriers and limitations to expanding that product to maybe having cryptocurrencies on it or investments, building credit. I guess Tom, I'll go back to you to start for that. I mean, what's next from that product usability perspective?
That's a great question. I mean, Igor, you're probably the right guy to talk to about crypto in here. I know this is one of your specialist areas, and I'm not the right guy to talk to about this. So let me pass that one over to Igor for the crypto, and then we can talk, I think, more widely about product development, if that's all right, Liz.
No worries. So, Igor, are you ready to talk about possibilities of crypto for a young person's card?
I'd love to pick it up, but I would differentiate crypto from cryptocurrencies, and I would say like the distributed ledger technologies. So teenagers, you don't want to get them started as day traders in Bitcoin, right? That's not the goal. Nobody wants a 15-year-old Wolf of Wall Street. What you do want them is to essentially be able to earn money if they are producing digital art as NFTs or collectibles. You do want them to have kind of a participation in that type of token economy. And in that way, they're actually learning how to be creators, how to participate. And crypto in that sense, so NFTs can be anything from cards or movie theater tickets or concert tickets. Eventually, you want to kind of a little bit of hand-holding, teach them basic investment skills. So from stocks, to shares, the ETFs. And when they are comfortable with that, and there are parents hand-holding them, then maybe you want to also introduce crypto ETFs or just normal trading in cryptocurrency. But it should definitely be only for the more advanced ones that are attracted for the right way. We've seen a lot of teenagers that say, oh, I trade crypto, 16-year-olds, I trade crypto and I just 2x'd my money in 10 days. How do you tell them a savings account is going to give you 1% per annum if they're used to 100% a week?
And this is, remember I was saying about how dangerous it is teaching kids how to gamble via loot boxes. And this is really no different, is it?
Cryptocurrency will offer you 10x in a week. Roulette tables offer you 36x in one spin, right? At which point does it stop being an investment and becomes speculation? So that's where the education part really kicks in. Yeah, we're not saying crypto is bad, and there's literally no rules.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that education? Should that come? Is that the sole responsibility of the parent or guardian, or from the service that they're trading crypto on?
If you think of kids these days, schools more or less don't teach money skills. Some do, but not a lot. Parents reflect on their own experiences, but crypto is new to everybody. So there's a huge gap of not only teaching the children, but also teaching parents. And that's why parents also have access to the app. They get prompts, various ways of kind of how do you get your kids around the dinner table, and topical prompts, how to start off a discussion. So you're teaching both parents and kids.
I mean, a little bit. We've got a question from the audience, which is kind of adjacent to a little bit of what we're talking about, which is when a kid has a purchase that they've done by mistake. Is there a way to have a control or a refund in place? How does that work when a mistake has happened, or is it just all a learning experience for them? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that question.
Okay, fine. I mean, we are subject to we are subject to the same chargeback rules that any other card program would be subject to. So, if your child orders something and it doesn't arrive, for example, then absolutely we can run a chargeback in exactly the same way that you could do if you put it on your own debit card or your own credit card. The mistake purchase is an interesting one. What happens if your child orders a pair of trainers and they do arrive, but you didn't want them to order the pair of trainers, and that's that one is not really something we can control within the card program. We talked before about how important it is to have parents involved in these discussions and conversations. That's where that one comes in.
And to a certain extent, you can prevent those mistakes by putting in some parental controls. So if a mistake is defined as a child spending €1,000 on something they don't need, you put in limits that can be either per various stores, per MCC codes, or kind of the maximum amount they will spend on gaming a month is X, 20, 30 euros. So you make sure that they can still experiment within a certain range. Any amount above a certain amount can be canceled or needs pre-approval by the parent. So everything is programmable in that way. And of course, as we move to online shopping, a lot of stores are giving no questions asked returns of products. So it's outside of the cart program, but a lot of those mistakes are very reversible.
Yeah, Liz, if I can touch upon, building on what Igor's saying, I think that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here. Like, be really specific on the powerful controls and dynamic controls that they also connect to the API technologies that we're using, right? So connecting with also the whole tech stack that the neobanks and the teen neobanks can use, is that we can have all this flexibility around manipulating category codes, special stores, etc., etc. And I think you can build on the customer request as you grow, right? Different types of controls. Again, it's a tool that the parent will need to know how to use, because if the limits also, if a parent abuses them, a teenager will get back to the parent and say, at the end of the day, I have no freedom. So it comes back to what we're saying with Tom. It's a tool. It's not the family itself.
So I wanted to maybe ask a question about the like this market. I know we talked a bit about how this group ages out of the product. And David, I'm curious. I want to kind of bring you back into the discussion as well with a kind of a follow-up question. We started off our discussion with Tom saying, in your markets, you don't have a lot of competition, while in the UK, there is now this growing amount of competition. I mean, why is delivering a product for this market new? Why isn't there more competition for this? And is that going to change in each of your regions in the future? There'll be a whole raft of under 18 products. So I don't know if David, maybe you want to come in, make a comment on that.
I think if we talk about traditional banks, they have probably forgotten about a very underserved segment of the population, which is the young one. Probably because the customer acquisition is more expensive, or because it comes with certain patterns, like more modern style that they are not willing to follow, or it's just like I don't understand all the reasons, but what I know is that they have left this space for the fintechs to kind of pop up and bring this traction. And I think now we can see that traditional banks are kind of speeding up and trying to catch up with aiming at young people. Sorry, Tom?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting. There's two threads here that I'd like to pull together. One is this idea of an underserved market that banks have forgotten about, or banks have decided aren't profitable. And the other one touches on the aging out of the products question, or at least aging in general. We noticed a real gap in the market, not just at the younger age of the audience, but also as people get older. There is also a similar need for a product in the market. So we've launched a product recently for elderly and vulnerable users, and have very, very similar needs. And might be getting, as we get older, we're more likely to suffer from things like dementia, Alzheimer's, but also the product works for people with physical disabilities, learning difficulties. So we've launched this wonderful thing called Clever. It says getting the plug-in quickly. Which is a product aimed exactly for this audience. I find it fascinating that we've got these two age ranges right at the opposite ends of the spectrum, both of which, David, as you say, have been kind of ignored.
And on the topic of aging out, so you've got teenagers aging out at 18, but you equally got 9-year-olds aging into 10-year-olds at the beginning. So you're constantly having the same bandwidth of population going through your product. And the way you ask the question, why is there no one universal that covers all markets? I can kind of mirror the adult banking, where even though there's a lot of things that can be translated from country to country, there are specifics. So there's two threads being pulled. One is let's do it everywhere universally, and the other one is let's do it very specific to each market. So we've seen big banks close down half of their offices across the world and then focus on Northwest Europe, or only be LATAM banks, or only be Americas, while some other banks are trying to expand into probably every UN country they can find. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of kind of cultural approach and what their objectives are and how they want to approach it. I think that's why the four of us all have similar but slightly different products as well.
Mm-hmm. The Dutch market, Igor, you know this better than anyone in the world, is a really fascinating fintech market, because there's sort of half a dozen, well, exaggeration, but there's a number of local payment systems in the Dutch market that nobody uses, not even in Belgium. So it's
ideal. And there is competition. So David and Gimme just came into our market a couple of months ago, and we welcomed them with open arms.
There will be growth. So, I mean, it's interesting. I remember a number of years ago, every new fintech startup in the retail space was aimed at the so-called millennial group of people. But if you look at the sort of that 8 to 18 age range that we're sort of talking about, that generation changes as we've been talking about. They age up and new young people come in. Does this group have a unique set of customer behaviors, or is that behavior going to change and shift as new young people fill in the people that age out? So I don't know whether you can talk about some of the customer behaviors that you've observed from this group and how they've changed over the years. I don't know who wants to jump in on that one.
I would love to jump in. So
Go for it.
It's amazing how digitally native this new generation is, to the point where me and my co-founder are making TikToks, something I never thought I would be doing as a startup founder. So it's definitely, because Facebook and Instagram are losing users. So something that for us was normal right now, and kind of that's one of the answers to the question, why do teens want a dedicated product? They want something of their own space. People are leaving Facebook because they see their grandparents on Facebook and they don't want to. I saw my dad on Instagram and immediately it was, okay, time for the next thing. So now I'm on TikTok and it's addictive. It's essentially the new generations are glued to their phones. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. That's just how they operate. Imagine if we had all of the world's knowledge at our fingertips at any moment in time growing up, how we would live differently. So it's very much digitally native, and it's trust-based. So they will take referrals from each other. They will listen to influencers. There's such a thing as influencers. We used to have famous people that were famous for sports or acting ability or some sort of talent besides being in front of a camera. So it's very much a trust-based system, digitally native, and they want their own dedicated products. They don't want to share a platform with their parents.
Interesting. Anyone else have thoughts? Wants to pop in? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think it's in general, it's harder to have a healthy relationship with money when it's just numbers on a screen and you are not fully aware, especially without the education of what you have, than when we actually had the cash in our hands. Because then I think we tried to be a little bit more conservative, right? Because we could physically feel what money was. So I think back to what we were discussing also earlier with this new generations, precaution or like prevention is super important, because in this digitalized world, it's super easy that you run out of money without really realizing, just sitting in front of your computer 15 minutes, either investing in crypto and it's like a bad move, or these things happen. So that's why, again, it's about education. Education is so important for teenagers.
Yeah. I mean, there's just to also put my thought here. I mean, that's the same, because they are digital natives. We try to follow them, right? So we all try to follow this generation into how they behave, and they always excite us in how digital they are. And this imposes many risks. I mean, the whole thing of being so digital it's extremely risky in the moves you can make online, right? So you can lose all your money in a minute, as David said. You can jump into a fraud scheme anytime. Fake influencers or loot boxes that basically is gambling 100%. And this needs to be, there's no dumb prepaid card or dumb system that can solve this other than, as we said before, a purpose-built solution for this type of audience.
So maybe I can stay with you, because I find it interesting that sometimes I think as older people, we're viewing behavior of younger people through our lens. And when you mention, digital first, I mean, I'm 50 years old, but my phone is always with me. My 17-year-old, yeah, I agree. They're always on their phone. But I think in terms of that behavior, I think we assume a type of app or company loyalty that people younger just don't have, because it's always at their fingertips, and that apps can be downloaded and then deleted and then used for a while, then got rid of. I mean, you mentioned, I think Igor mentioned before, there was Facebook, then Instagram, now TikTok, and all these things are kind of falling off the cliff and new things are coming in. So how do you, if you are a business that's trying to lock in this customer group somehow, but their behavior is really, loyalty is not a thing because everything's easily downloadable. Have you witnessed any of that behavior or seen data on that at all?
One important thing, that it's very easy for us to talk about, this young generation or our target audience as being 8 to 18. Actually, we go down to 6 to 18. It's important to recognize that the behaviors and likes and attitudes of a 6, 7, 8-year-old are very different to 12, 13-year-old, are very different to a 14, 15-year-old. So first and foremost, if you're expecting for your brand to be relevant to that child all the way through that journey, then the brand has to evolve with the child as it goes along. And it's rare that you can find one message or system or platform that will serve everything from age 6 upwards. And I think around this table, all of us are very aware of this within our products. If we look at the features in the product, for example, if you have a very young child using a debit card, you can lock down almost everything. You can say, right, it can't be used online. You can't use this at ATMs. You have very strict limits on how much you can spend every day. And as your child gets older and as your child has more freedom, wants more freedom, and then you can start unlocking things for them. So you can allow the product to kind of grow and evolve with them over time. I think that's critical for maintaining trust with the child as they grow up.
Any other thoughts?
We have also changed, a little bit our approach, as in, I don't think that we feel so much competitors, because the world is evolving so fast that for us it's important to partner up. Because it's like you just said, Liz, like one kid can move so fast from one app to another. And so it's going to be easier and easier to lose customers. And there is no way that having that competitive spirit back to the 90s, so to speak, will help us in the in the current situation or this industry. So I think for us, it's also important to have these forums where we feel that we are all part of something and we are contributing with something to society. And at the end of the day, the four of us have the same kind of vision. And we are not such a huge companies, and we are very well aware of what these kids can do in one day, right? To jump from one app to another. So I think that sort of partnerships we will experience more and more.
I think to that point, if you take a look at adult banks, there's no country in the world that has a monopoly with only one bank. There will always be people that are dissatisfied with one service and then jump off somewhere else or later come back. It's about continuously competing to make sure that your customer is the happiest. And from a point of view as a startup founder, if you have critical and judgmental customers, that means you can't get sloppy. You have to continuously talk to your customers, know what they want, and build it for them. And that's how you provide value, and that's how you earn your bread, right? So.
And also, don't forget, our customers are not just the young people. Our customers just as well are the parents as well. And it's sometimes a delicate tightrope you have to walk, where you you can speak to young people in their language and in an authentic way, but you still have to maintain this trust relationship with the parents as well.
One thing I can kind of add to wrap it all up is I don't feel that teen neobanking competes with each other. When we just started off NikiCard, I rang up, literally cold called every teen CEO in the world and said, I'm trying to build a teen neobank. Can you talk to me? And 14 of them answered and said, yes, let's have a call. I did this and this and this wrong. Avoid this. Don't go down this road. If you ever need help, call me up. Like, that's how I met Tom. It is an amazing space where everybody wants to help each other, because if we succeed in the Netherlands, then Wally in Greece can tell their investors, see, this is working. It's making sense. It's going to grow. We can do the same thing in Greece. And right now I see a lot of them like popping up like mushrooms in Southeast Asia as well. So there's so much market and so much opportunity that by the time we are all big enough to compete with each other, we'll already be happy that we exist.
I completely agree. I think the fintech founder community is a very collegiate bunch. So I do agree with you on that. Always, if you're out there in the audience about to found a company, there's lots of people you can put out and ask questions, and there's lots of people who will sit down with you and help you with your business. So yeah, everyone's waving. Yeah, you have 4 founders right here. So wonderful. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this very interesting discussion on youth neobanks, and thank you very much, the audience, for coming in, and stay tuned for the next API Chronicles coming up from Marqeta, which is the next few weeks. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Liz, for hosting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, audience.
Ciao.